Hey everybody, so we're continuing on with this cylinder head replacement. So I cleaned the block off with a carbide scraper, and when I was done I used an SOS pad, and not an SOS pad, but I used a, what is it called, some piece of Scotch-Brite. So some Scotch-Brite, and I cleaned this all up. I made sure I didn't have anything that fell, any of the gasket material that fell in the lifters. I blew those out. I blew out all of the holes that the bolts go into. Keep them free of like coolant, oil, antifreeze, diesel, anything that might fill up in there, because it will keep you from, it'll get you like a hydraulic lock on the bolt and it won't go in right. So make sure all those holes are blown out. Make sure there's nothing in the cylinders. I cleaned all the oil and the diesel that falls into the cylinders on the pistons out. Make sure there's no gasket material, obviously, in the cylinders. I didn't have an issue with a head gasket. You are supposed to check your height of the liner height. I think it's supposed to be between 2 thousandths and 5 thousandths. I don't foresee an issue with that, because like I said, I didn't have a gasket issue. I don't have high mileage on this. This motor only has, I think, 40,000 miles on it. So I don't think that those got hammered in or anything. So if you're doing more of a rebuild, and this is just kind of like looking for some information, you can get these liners out without the puller tool. I've used a bottle jack and a piece of wood underneath the engine. So you take the oil pan off, obviously take your connecting rods, caps off, and I used a piece of wood, like a 2x4, and a bottle jack to actually push the liners up from underneath. That works too. But I just have a head swap. So we got the cylinder or the block all cleaned up. After I Scotch-Brited it, I also used some brake clean and wiped it all down to get the grease and oil off that was on there. I use a vacuum cleaner when I'm scraping the gasket material off of the head to keep it from falling into holes and stuff. So I just keep the vacuum cleaner nozzle really close to what I'm scraping, and as it comes off, it gets sucked right into the vacuum cleaner. I did have some little pieces like that will drop in the hole, but like I said, they get blown out. Make sure everything's blown off nice and clean, and the surface is basically clean and no material left on there. Yeah, so we'll continue on. Oh, a little piece of paper towel. So this does come with a gasket kit. I'll show you the gasket kit with the cylinder head gasket kit that comes with it. Let's see. There's a part number on it. That's probably for the cylinder head gasket kit. Anyway. So it comes with the head gasket, the intake and the exhaust manifold gasket, and a set of head bolts. These are torque to yield head bolts, so I would recommend replacing them. I do believe that there's a measurement. You can measure them and make sure they're still within spec. I just opted to replace them. This kit, I believe, was for us $495. This cylinder head for us was $3,800. So it's kind of pricey, but it is what it is. And yeah, so anyway, I'm transferring the intake from this one to this one. Cleaned up the surface. I'm going to torque these bolts down. When I took it apart, I took the EGR cooler off, and I did not take the bracket off of the EGR cooler. There's two bands that hold the EGR cooler into this bracket, and I left this on. I just took it off as one piece. There is a problem with getting one of the bolts out because it's behind the hose for the high pressure oil feed to the head, and that hose is very stiff, and I had to take it off and kind of pull it out of the way to get one of these bolts out. I think it was this one. But going back together, it needs to obviously be torqued in sequence because it's a long intake. manifold. So I ended up removing that from the EGR cooler so I can do the full torque sequence. I was just going to kind of do some of it or leave the bolts loose and then put them in there, but I need to use one of these bolts to actually lift the head with. So it was one of these bolts here that had a bracket on there for the grid heater relays was on that, and I used that one and just a hole in the other side where the exhaust, I use an exhaust bolt on the other side to just kind of lift the head up. But I want to put the manifold on because it's going to be easier for me to do it now than later, because a lot of that wiring runs up underneath here, and it actually goes into a couple of these bolts. You see right there, that bolts on some of the wiring underneath. And like I said, I don't really, there's very limited space, and I'd rather just do it now than later. There are some things that are not going to come with that kit. You will have to order some other gaskets and such, like this gasket you're going to have to order, unless you leave that on, which is kind of a big thing. So it's, I mean, I guess you could leave it on, but I took it off. So you're going to need that gasket. You're going to need, I'm going to change the pucks in the oil manifold. I don't know if I can show it to you. So these are your pucks right there. Those feed oil to the injectors. Those are known for failing. Those are known for leaking and being an issue. So I'm just going to change those. I'm going to do the entire puck, not just the O-rings. I'm also going to change one of these sensors. I believe it's the injection control pressure sensor. I'm going to change that one too. This has a solenoid for the exhaust brake. There's an exhaust brake solenoid, and then there's going to be an exhaust brake pressure sensor on there as well. I believe that is going to be our issue in the 2012 we have, because the exhaust brake works, and then all of a sudden after like an hour or so it stops working, and I believe that solenoid is actually probably sticking. It's either going to be the solenoid or the valve under it. I think they heat up, and then I believe it's probably not working. That's what I'm thinking. I haven't got into it yet because it's going to be a nightmare, or probably not a nightmare, but a pain to get the valve cover off, because there's a lot of crap on that one, even more than this one. So yeah, so the head's ready, or so the block's ready for the head. I want to try to get that on today, and we'll put the intake on this. Once the intake's on this, I'm going to pull it out, and I'm going to clean the bottom, the mating surface, and get the Cosmoline or the shipping oil or whatever's on it off. And then I'm going to set it on, and I'm hoping to get the head torqued today. I know it sounds like it's not much, but like cleaning the stuff up, it actually is very time consuming. Prepping all the things and cleaning it and making sure everything's good, changing like the O-rings and stuff. It takes a lot longer than you'd think. It's like in and out. Oh, you just put it up, bolt it on, and throw it in. I guess you probably could just slam the bolts in with whatever you want. If it's not yours, go ahead and do whatever you want. But personally, if I'm responsible for it, I like to do a good job, and I don't want to be looked at like you're half-ass. So that's why it takes me a little bit longer than it probably takes most people, is because I try to make it perfect, or as close to it as I can reasonably get. You know, if I think it's going to be a problem, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to try to correct it as best I can so I don't have a problem. And that's just kind of the way it is. So that's why it takes me longer to do everything. So anyway, we're going to torque these head bolts down. I'll show you a diagram right here. Alright, so this is going to get, these bolts are going to get torqued to 45 foot-pounds in the sequence that was shown on the diagram. So basically you're going to start like here. Be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. But you're going to start in the middle and then just work your way out in a spiral. So right here I have to go and get actually another socket, because there's 2 or 3 different size bolts that go into this intake. It's a little bit weird. Like I think there's 3 different sizes. I can't exactly remember. I know the bracket that holds the EGR cooler has bigger size bolts in it, but I think there's actually, like I say, 2 more different sizes. I think there's also like a 13 and a 15 as well, but I can't exactly remember. So I get ready to lift the head. Actually, right there, it was balanced pretty well. I didn't have too many issues swinging it in there and lift it up pretty good. That chain fall worked pretty well. I've done this before on an 06, and I used a telescopic boom that went on the front of a loader, and we just kind of stuck it over the front of the hood, and I just directed the guy, and I had a come along that was on the loader so I could get like fine tuning. I found that one to be a little bit more difficult to get the head underneath the cab. I don't know if they're the same cab or not, but this one actually had way more room, and it was a lot easier to get it in there. All right, so I hope everybody's got the torquing arms on, because this is going to be a lot of torquing. You've got we got 26 bolts, and you're going to have to perform 4 steps for your 26 bolts. So first step is cylinder head bolt torque sequence A. You're going to torque to 110 foot-pounds. That is your torque sequence A. Once you finish torque sequence A, you're going to go torque sequence B to 150 foot-pounds. Once you finish torque sequence B, you are going to do another torque sequence for the torque to yield procedure. Here you can mark it. Start your beginning marks 190 degrees away and 120 degrees away. Then you're going to do, is it torque sequence A for all of them? A, yep. So then you're going to do a 90-degree turn for all of them in torque sequence A again. Once you are done with your 90-degree turn, you are going to go an additional 30 degrees to a 120-degree turn for torque sequence A. So by the time you're done, it's going to be real tight, and you're going to be pretty tired because that's a lot of bolts. So you want to lightly oil the bolts before you torque them, and then and torque away. So let's go do that. So I like to keep a little jug of oil there, put it on the bolts, and then kind of run them in a little bit with that impact gun. I actually kind of like that little snap-on impact gun. It works pretty well. It doesn't have a whole ton of torque, but it's pretty handy because it's just got like a front and a reverse trigger on it, so you can just move your finger from one side of the trigger to the other, like kind of like a rocker, and you can go forward or backwards. And I find it kind of handy. It's small, it gets into places pretty well, but it doesn't have a whole ton of torque. So right here I'm doing the torque sequence A to the 110 foot-pounds. I got that torque wrench from Harbor Freight. It is the Quinn version. I got it when I was doing the Cummins engine rebuild because it has the torque angle sensor in it, and you can do torque angles with it and not have to use the little degree wheel or mark the bolts or anything. It actually is really pretty handy. So now I'm doing torque sequence B. I think it was, what, the 150 foot-pounds, and just kind of running along. The only thing I don't like about that torque wrench is it doesn't click. For some reason, oh, actually, you know what? I went to the other one. I'm using the snap-on one now because it does click, and I like the one that clicks better than the one that doesn't click. So I did it once, and then I'm just running through it again real quick just to make sure it's all the same. So right here, I did do the torque angle thing with the dots. I did put the dots on one of them, and I'm checking them, and I'm just verifying that I am getting the 90 degrees and the 30 degrees out of it, and it came out right. So I find it was pretty accurate with the torque angles, and it was just a complete time saver because the pressure you're putting on there, it's very difficult to monitor exactly how far you're going, and that torque wrench will actually tell you the degrees you're at as you're going. Now, I'm sure there's better ones out there, but for, I think it was like $120, $150 or something, you can't really beat it. I mean, it's pretty good. So here I am setting it to 30 degrees, and then I checked to make sure the dots lined up, and they did. So I'm just marking the bolts so I know which one I'm at, because it's easy to lose track when you're doing 26 of them in the ocean of hardware that's on there. But I definitely liked having that torque wrench. I would recommend at least a torque angle one like that, because I think the way that works is it senses when you put 12.5 foot-pounds on it, and then that's when it starts reading. Hello. So I'm going to reseal these injectors. We're going to change the copper gasket on the bottom. It seals combustion gases. And we're going to change these two O-rings here, and that seals off the diesel fuel, let's say doodad channel. So diesel fuel comes into the head, and it basically surrounds this section here, and it just goes into these holes, and then the oil manifold plugs into the top of the injector, and then that's where the pressure comes from to actually squirt the fuel out of the nozzle. So you get like 45 to 60 pounds or something like that of diesel comes into here, and it fills this area, and then the high pressure oil, once the injector is electrified, it opens up with a poppet valve or whatever you call it, and then allows the high pressure oil to force down the plunger, which actually squirts the fuel out. So what we gotta do is, like I say, change this copper gasket, this O-ring, and then this O-ring. Here is the part number for the kit. Like I say, it comes with the two O-rings and the copper gasket. So you're just gonna rest it at the top one. The way I like to get these off is with like a razor, come in behind it. Works a little better if you clean the nozzle too. And there's that. So, a piece of Scotch-Brite, clean up the tip. O-ring on. Probably go with the bottom one first. That way it kind of bridges the gap. This doesn't matter, they're different sizes anyway. Top O-ring. And then this little crush washer. You see it's kind of dimpled where it's raised in the center, and that goes down. These are usually a real pain to get back on for some reason. I think in the past I've filed the little nubs inside down a little bit because it's just, I mean, it's real difficult to press them on. I think you can use a socket too. Shove them on with a socket. Oh, so I'm gonna take a little chainsaw file and I'm gonna file these down a smidge just so they go on easier, because I think they're going too hard. You gotta like really try to force them on there, and I don't really want to do that. All right, so I filed them little inside nubs down just a smidge, just so they go on a little easier. I mean, there's no real kind of playing it. It's just sliding on easier than it would had I not. Not that it's easy still. No. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. So I'm gonna get the rest of them. All right, so I got all these seals and little gasket swapped over. So I'm gonna put these in. I'm gonna use a T40 Torx bit on the hold down bolt, and they're gonna get torqued to 30 foot-pounds. I'm gonna put a little bit of oil on the seals here where the O-rings help it go in. You can try to push it in as far as you can by hand, try to seat it all the way, and then say torque the Torx bit to 30 foot-pounds. So I'm just pulling the caps out, making sure that the bores are clear. There isn't any dust or anything in there that's going to get underneath that little crush washer. So the last thing you want to do is have it not seal, and then you're losing combustion gases in there. Because if you get combustion gases in there, I guess it can blow the fuel out of the fuel lines, because it just overpowers the pressure of the fuel, and it'll aerate it. I don't know if it happens much on this version, but I'm pretty sure it happens more on the year before this, or the generation before this. But I don't exactly remember. So we're just putting 6 of them in. Take the cloth off. I like to cover it with paper towels just to make sure that nothing really gets in there. It kind of keeps it cleaner. You know, putting all the push rods back in the same order that they came out, so they match up with the ball and the socket of the lifter and the rocker arm. And I'm putting little bridges on that bridge the rocker, or the valves. So you only have one rocker arm, obviously pushes 2 valves. So I had to go back. I didn't relieve all the pressure. I didn't back off all the adjusters on those rocker arms. I just zipped the hold down bolts out in the reverse order that they went in. So right now I'm just loosening all the adjusters up so I can tighten down the rocker set there, and things aren't kind of pushing and bending funny. It's that back one right there I was kind of having trouble with. It's a little difficult to get everything lined up, because what do you got? You get 12 rockers there, and then you have to have them line up, and then everything's got to sit flat, and then you got to make sure those little valve bridges don't kind of sit cockeyed or anything on there, and it takes a little bit of fiddling to get it done. So I'm just kind of taking the slack out a little bit here to get it sort of close, so we can set the valve lash. All right, so you're going to torque these in 2 stages. You're going to start here, so you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's how you're going to do it. First stage is 20 foot-pounds, and the second stage is 27 foot-pounds. All right, so I'm going to adjust these valves, or rocker arms, whatever you want to term the phrase. So everything is getting adjusted to 19 thousandths or 0.019. That is intake exhaust. This also has an exhaust brake that's built into the oil manifold that is going to contact the exhaust valves on top of this rocker here. That is also getting torqued to, not torqued to, but that is also getting set to 19 thousandths as well. So you're going to set this at top dead center. You're either going to be on top dead center on your number 1 or top dead center on your number 6. There is your marks right there. There's a little notch in the pulley, and there's a little arrow on the timing cover. So when it's in this position, so basically that's going to tell you that you're in top dead center of one of them. I went over here and I noticed that this number 3 valve is fully extended. So when I came over here, I looked. Chart 3 shows when you're on top dead center of cylinder 1, you can adjust the 1, 2, and 3, but you can't adjust the 4th. So yeah, so you're 1, 2, 3, and 4. This one's high, so I know I am on top dead center of number 1 cylinder. So when you're on top dead center of number 1, you're going to adjust 1, 2, 3, and skip 4 and 5. You're going to do 6 and 7. You're going to skip 8, 9, do 10, and skip 11 and 12. Then you're going to rotate it around 1 turn to top dead center again, which would be top dead center on number 6. And in that situation, you can adjust valves 4, 5, skip 6 and 7. You're going to do 8, 9, skip 10, and 11 and 12. So that's how you're going to do that. I'm going to basically do this 4 times. I'm going to turn it over 4 times because I'm going to have a hard time, I believe, getting this, the exhaust valve lashes with that oil manifold on top, because it's going to sit right here, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get under there very well. So I'm going to do all the valves first, and then I'm going to go back over and I'm going to do the oil manifold exhaust brake lash, which is also getting set to 19 thousandths. So top dead center on number 1, you're going to do cylinder 1, skip cylinder 2, you're going to do cylinder 3, skip cylinder 4, and do cylinder 5. So you're going to do 1 turn around, so you're top dead center on cylinder 6, and then you are going to do 2, 4, and 6 for the valve lash for the brakes. So that's how we're going to do that. And yeah, so I assume most people, if you're this far into it, you know what you're doing with setting the valve lash. You're going to stick your feeler gauge under, and you're going to set your height on your adjuster to a slight drag, and then you're going to tighten down your adjusting or your jam nut and basically hold the adjuster, and you want to end up with a slight drag on there. So I know I said I had to turn the engine over 4 times, but I actually have to turn it over 3 times because I can get half of the exhaust brake lash done on the 2nd rotation. Alright, so working on this oil manifold, you can either reseal these the oil manifold pucks, I guess I call them, or you can get new ones. I got new ones because they can leak, like inside here too. So I just happened to get some new ones. You do need a special socket. Looks like that. A little hole in it. To remove them, there is an O-ring on the inside, and they get torqued to 150 foot-pounds. Also, there are some sensors on here. You have the injection control pressure sensor, the solenoid for the exhaust brake, or I guess is it exhaust brake or engine? I think it's engine brake you call it, because it's not on the exhaust. So solenoid for the engine brake, and then the brake pressure control sensor, which is the exact same sensor as this, in case you're wondering. Let's see what we got. Here's our sensor. Here's our part number for our sensor. There is our part number for the pucks. This is what they look like. So I'm going to swap these out, and I am changing obviously the ICP sensor, but I'm going to do that after I put the manifold in the head, just so I don't run the risk of breaking it. But basically those are pretty tight, so I found the easiest way is to kind of hold the manifold in this orientation, and then you can put the ratchet on there and just push down like that. If you try to go sideways, it's going to spin. So like that, it's heavy enough that you just kind of break them loose. And then I'll do the same thing for putting them in. Just tighten them up and then torque them that way, and we should be fine. Make sure you oil your O-rings as well. So I'm just pulling these pucks out right now. There ain't anything really special or different about it. They pretty much just come right out, and then put the new ones right back in. I put some oil on the O-rings before I threaded them in, just to make sure you don't get any tearing or anything, and it installs easily without damaging them. And yeah, no real issues with it. I used to have a starting problem with it, so I figured while I had it apart, I would kind of take care of that, because those can be problematic and cause issues.